Couch Casual, where today we are going to be grading every team's first round picks, or if they made a trade, how well, like out of the first round, grade the trades. Before we get into this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. But let's get into the tier list. Now, for the base structure of the tier list, we have A, B+, B, C+, C, D+, and D. Some of these tiers might get deleted, and some of them might not get used. This is just our initial framework for this sort of tier list. Now, I could just give grades, but I like doing a tier list because it shows each team relative to each other. But we'll start off with the first pick, which was Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to give this where are the Titans? I'm going to give this one an A. It was the easy pick. I think he's the best quarterback. You obviously get your hopeful franchise QB. I think they couldn't do anything else. It just made sense. You know what? I'm going to get rid of the D+ real quick. The D+, C+. It's either an A pick, B pick, C pick, or D pick. I'm going to give the Titans an A. Now, the second pick, the Jags traded up for Travis Hunter. Now, they did trade up a lot to get him. Mainly, I think their second and a future first. They might have got a third from Cleveland. So they traded up a lot, but they got potentially the best player in the draft in Travis Hunter. It seems like they are going to let him play both. I mean, you don't trade up. You don't give up that much to take Travis Hunter and use him as a receiver or use him as a corner. You got to use him at both. So it was a gamble. And for that, I will give it a B just because of the assets they gave to get him. Now, Travis Hunter is a phenomenal player, but I'm just going to give it a B for now. You know, I'll add a tier because 4 tiers seems weird. We will add an S tier. I think the Titans are still an A tier pick, but I'm going to give the Jags a B. Next, we have, I might move them around. We have the Giants getting Abdul Carter at 3. I think this is another, I'm going to also factor in position value of pick as well. I think this is another A tier pick. You stick at 3. There might have been trade back spots. They were taking calls just like the Browns. You get an elite pass rusher prospect next to Brian Burns, and now you can see what you want to do with Kayvon Thibodeaux because you can't trade Burns after paying him $30 million a year. So I like it. Arguably best player on the board as well. Next is the Patriots getting Will Campbell at 4. I mean, I don't know who's the better tackle between him or Membo. So I think this is a B or an A. I mean, it's kind of hard to mess up the top picks, which is why most of them will probably get a high grade for me. I'm going to give the Patriots an A. You help out Drake May. Hopefully you can get him some weapons later in the draft. So I'm going to give it an A for now. Next is the Browns going Mason Graham at 5. I'm giving this an S tier, personally. You get Jags next year's first. You have, pick 33 and even like 36 or whatever it is. You get one of the better players in the draft in Mason Graham to pair alongside Myles Garrett. And the Jags might not be that best team next year. So that first round pick could be in the top 20s, maybe even in the top 15. And you still get an elite player in Mason Graham, a blue chip player that people think. So I think this is an S tier draft overall for the Browns. Next is the Raiders getting Ashton Jeanty at 6. I really like Ashton Jeanty. I know 6 is high for a running back. Haven't seen that in a while. Even Bijan and Jameer weren't that high. but I think Ashton Jeanty is that good. And the Raiders just needed a lot. And without Mason Graham on the board, it was pretty much, do you go McMillan or Jeanty? And I think their pick was well spent on Jeanty at 6. I'm going to give him an A as well. Next is the Jets going Armand Membo at 7. I'm going to give this a B because I'm not super convinced on Armand Membo. And I like protecting Justin Fields, but I feel like you don't have much weaponry to throw the ball to with Justin Fields. I could be convinced, and I might even I might even move him up to an A because I like Membo, but I'm going to give it a B for now. I also feel like I have to just give people lower grades. I can't just give them all A's. Next is the Panthers going McMillan. Speaking of an A, I'm going to give this one an A as well. The only reason it's not an S is because they didn't address defense, which was horrible. I think it was the worst scoring defense in terms of like points allowed in the history of football. So that's not good. They did spend money on defense, so maybe that helped them not be forced to take defense here. The pick and the fit is an S. But just because he doesn't play defense, I'm moving it to an A. There just wasn't necessarily a guy worth taking at 8 on the defensive side of the ball. And I think you can't just reach for the sake of reaching. So that's why it's not an S, just because they didn't really get an opportunity to make an S tier pick, in my opinion. The pick they had to make was either McMillan or Jalen Walker, and I don't think that's an S tier pick. They just didn't have the opportunity. If Mason Graham fell to them and they took him, it would have been an S tier for them. So I'm going to give them an A. Next is the Saints going Kelvin Banks tackle out of Texas. I thought they'd go Shador here because you don't have anybody at QB. Your defense, I mean, their pass rush is still not the best, but they still have good defense outside of that. I'm going to give this a B for them. I didn't really like the Kelvin Banks pick. I didn't think they needed a tackle necessarily. I know Ryan Ramczyk retired and the Trevor Penning experience hasn't worked out, but I just didn't think they needed a tackle here at 9. Next is the Bears going with Colston Loveland at 10 out of Michigan. I'm going to give this a C, just because if you go tight end, I think you go Tyler Warren. Now, I get it. No Mason Graham on the board. No Will Campbell on the board. No Jeanty on the board. And not even get Kelvin Banks on the board, who I thought they'd go with, because I didn't think the Saints would go with him. So I get it, having to go a different direction. But I think if you're going to go tight end, you go Tyler Warren. Now, I don't even know if Tyler Warren's worth taking at 10, but I don't know if Colston Loveland is either. I still think he's a good player, and I think Ben Johnson uses 2 tight ends, which is why they could go tight end despite having Cole Kmet. But I think if you go tight end, you go Warren. Still not a bad player, so I'm not having it ranked super low, so I'm going to keep it at a C. I don't even know if anyone's going to get a D. Next is the Niners going Mykel Williams, edge rusher out of Georgia. I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give it a B, just because I'm not convinced on Mykel Williams. But, I mean, Georgia defensive player, you can't go wrong. They needed somebody next to Nick Bosa. I'm just not necessarily 100% convinced on Mykel Williams. I like him, so I'm going to give him a B. Next is the Cowboys at 12 going Tyler Booker. They needed help on the O-line, next to Tyler Smith. So you got the Tylers. But I'm going to give this a C just because I think they had more needs. I know McMillan wasn't available for him, which is obviously what you want. But you still could have went Matthew Golden. You still could have went Egbuka. You still could have got a pass rusher next to Micah Parsons. I don't know if you needed Booker at 12, so I'm going to give it a C. Yeah, I'm deleting the D tier. You can't really, you can't know how good a pick is until 3 years from now, so it's kind of hard to give someone a D for a pick because you just never know. any player could be really good or really bad. So, oops. Next is the Dolphins taking Kenneth Grant at 13, D tackle out of Michigan. I didn't mind the pick. With how the board's fallen, I thought they'd go corner, but I guess those guys weren't viewed as highly as maybe we thought because Will Johnson fell out of the first and Jedi Barron went somewhere where I thought he'd go, but I was hoping they would be able to get tackle, but again, maybe the tackles weren't worth taking without Kelvin Banks on the board. Connor Lee or Josh Simmons, do you take one of those guys at 13? Probably not. They needed help on that D-line position. I think they just were in a tough position, so I'm going to give them a B. Not a bad pick. I like Kenneth Grant. I really like Kenneth Grant. I just think they weren't given, just kind of like the Panthers, they weren't given an opportunity to make a great pick, I guess. Next is the Colts at 14 getting Tyler Warren. I mean, I think this is an S tier. You really needed a tight end, and you get potentially the best one, or how you view it, the best one, because the Bears took Colston Loveland. You get him at 14. I didn't think he'd... I mean, I had them taking him at 14 for a while, but based on all the stuff I was hearing, I didn't think he'd actually fall to them at 14, and he did. And now you have him alongside Jonathan Taylor, Pittman, Pierce, Downs, Mitchell, a good O-line still, a decent O-line still. They did lose a lot of pieces. This is a very good surrounding cast for Anthony Richardson in his potential last chance with the Colts. So I love this pick. Next is the Falcons going Jalen Walker at 15 and trading up for James Pierce at 26. They gave up a first for James Pierce. I know they moved up. They moved down to like a late 40s pick with the Rams. So I understand they did trade up a lot of spots, which is why they probably had to give up a first-round pick. But I'm going to give this a C. I know their defense was very bad, or like their pass rush was very bad last year. You know what? No, I'll give it a B. I'll give it a B. Because I like James Pierce. I don't know if I like a first-round pick for James Pierce, technically spending 2 first-round picks. I think they gave up a first. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you do address your need very well. You get Jalen Walker and James Pierce. And now because you have James Pierce, who is that traditional edge rusher, Jalen Walker kind of has a little more freedom to play off the ball, because if you're the Falcons and you just get Jalen Walker, you need him to be an edge rusher. But now that's not necessarily the case because you have James Pierce. So I like the picks. I just don't know if I love the assets they gave up to get the picks. Next is the Ravens getting Malachi Starks. Oh, wait, no. I was about to say. Is the Cardinals getting Walter Nolan at 16. I like this pick. I know corner was a thing that I viewed them getting, and obviously you still had Barron and Will Johnson on the board. But I really like Walter Nolan, potentially the best D tackle after Mason Graham. Thought he was going to go a lot higher. I think he was really rising up like projections and boards and rankings. And you get him at 16. Yeah, you get him at 16. I really like the pick. Bengals, Shamar Stewart at 15. Now, who knows what you're going to get in Shamar Stewart, because he didn't have the production, but he has the physical traits. Now, I think the Bengals just had to go best defensive lineman available, and outside of Derek Harmon and James Pierce and Tylee Williams, Shamar was probably the best defensive lineman on the board. So I like it for that reason, that they didn't go offense. And I'm not 100% convinced on Shamar Stewart, so I'm going to give it a B. Again, they took the best defensive player probably, which is what I wanted them to do. But I just don't know, like best, when I say best, the highest ranked defensive player. But I don't know if he's going to be necessarily the best defensive player they could have taken here. I think maybe they should have went a guy like Mike Green, but I would have loved Walter Nolan to them, but unfortunately could not get him. But I still like the pick, so I'll give him a B. It's going to be a lot of B's and A's. Seahawks got Gray Zabel at 18. I actually really like this pick. I'm going to give it an S. That may be very high for a guy like Gray Zabel, but I really like the pick because you're helping Sam Darnold out. Because we saw Sam Darnold, when he got a good surrounding cast with him in Minnesota, he played very well. And you paid him a lot of money, the Seahawks did. And he has good receivers. He has a running game. Has a reliable tight end in Noah Fant. But he doesn't have a great O-line. And if Gray Zabel can be that really good, versatile O-lineman for you, he can help Sam Darnold and help him earn the money, all the money you paid him. It may be high, but I like the pick. He's clearly the best. I keep doing that, showing my second round mock draft. He's clearly the best guard available. Next is the Bucks going Emeka Egbuka. I'm going to give this one a C, not because of Emeka Egbuka. I think he very well could be the next best receiver outside of McMillan. I just don't know if the Bucks need him. Now, maybe there's something going on with Chris Godwin's injury that we don't know. So they sort of got his replacement. Like, Chris Godwin. We know within our organization, Chris Godwin might not be the same or might not have a lot left. So we're going to get his replacement somewhat. But I just think their defense just wasn't the best. And there was such good secondary players on the board that I think they could have went that way. Or just defensive players. So player-wise, not a C at all. I love Emeka Egbuka. But I just think with what the Bucks needed, they didn't need to go receiver. But maybe they know something that we don't. Next is kind of the same thing here. Next is the Broncos going Jahdae Barron at 20. Originally, it was kind of like the Broncos or the Bucks pick for me. Like, they don't really need corner. They need offense. Bo Nix doesn't really have a lot to throw to. And you still have Amari Hampton who's on the board. You still have Matthew Golden, Luther Burden are still on the board. So I thought they'd go offense there. But instead they go with a corner. And their secondary with PS2, Riley Moss, and Jahdae Barron is very good. But again, I just think you need to help your young quarterback. So I'm going to give it a C. Again, not for the player of Jahdae Barron. He's very good. For the team fit. Now, maybe they thought there's really good receivers and running backs later in the draft, which there is. So, I'll move them up to a B. Just because I can see why they do it because of the receivers and running backs that are on the board. Whereas the Bucks, I don't know if I trust the corners that are available later. There is good pass rushers, but like the linebackers and the corners that are available later, I don't know if I trust them as much as the running backs and receivers. So I can see the Broncos pick making a little more sense than the Bucks. Next is the Steelers going Derek Harmon at 21. Now, we were all thinking, is this where Shedeur falls? It was not. I like Derek Harmon. You need somebody to be the next Cam Hayward because he is getting up there in age. Don't know how many years he has left. So I don't mind the pick for that reason. Player-wise, again, I like Derek Harmon. What was available? They don't need receiver unless they trade Pickens. They could have went, the running back route. But I think this is a solid pick for them. I'll give it an A for Pittsburgh. If they're not going Shedeur, who really knows who they're going? Now, they don't have a QB currently. So I think they should have taken a quarterback, so I'm actually going to move it to B. Because who is throwing them the ball? Mason Rudolph? They don't have a quarterback. At least teams like the Jets or teams like the Raiders who maybe get, even the Saints who may go QB, they have somebody. The Steelers don't really have anybody. I guess they're trusting Aaron Rodgers is going to play for them maybe. But I'll give it a B just because I think they should have taken Shedeur based on the fact that they really need a quarterback. Especially if you have Pickens and Metcalf, you need somebody to give them the ball. Chargers went Amari and Hampton at 22. I really liked this pick. I'm going to give it an A. Because, I mean, yeah, they could have went a receiver here, but I think they trust the receivers they have. And I think you can do with the receivers you have. But Harbaugh loves to run the ball. The top 2 tight ends were off the board. Why not get the next best running back, who clearly could have went a lot higher than 22? So I love it. I really like Hampton. I think him and Najee Harris could be a decent duo for a few, and then Amari and Hampton can take over as the true halfback one for that team. Next is the Packers getting Matthew Golden at 23. I think this is an S-tier pick. I really like Matthew Golden. They finally get a receiver high in the draft to potentially be their receiver one. They haven't taken a receiver in the first round in forever. I really like Matthew Golden. I know he only had one productive year at Texas, but what do you want him to do? Play 3 years at Texas when he's already played at, Houston? I really like the pick. I don't see where else to pack. I mean, you could have gone corner and Will Johnson, but clearly no one was going to take him. Could have went Maxwell Hairston, Trey Amos at corner. Could have got a pass rusher in James Pierce, but I like the pick in Matthew Golden. Next is the Vikings going Donovan Jackson at 24. This one was interesting. I didn't think it happened, but I kind of see it. They could have gone secondary and went Malachi Starks or Emin Wari. They could have got Will Johnson or Hairston or another corner. I don't mind them going offensive line to help out McCarthy. Because I just don't know about Donovan Jackson. I'll give them a B. That's just more of it's just a good pick. Nothing spectacular just because I'm not 100% familiar with Donovan Jackson. But I get why they took a guard. So next is the Giants trading up for Jackson Dart. Now, I already gave the Giants an A for Abdul Carter, and I forgot about the Jackson Dart pick. So I'm not going to give him a C because I like Abdul Carter, but I will move them down to a B tier because I'm not sure on the decision to trade up for Jackson Dart. Now, it did not cost them a lot because he was picked 25. You get a 5th-year option on him, and you might need 5 years. You get 5 years to evaluate him. Now, you should probably know by year 3, but you get the 5th-year option on him. It's not as expensive a contract because he's at 25. And again, they didn't trade up a ton, and I still really like Abdul Carter, so I'm going to give their overall first-round draft, a B. And then next we have... I'll also grade the Texans because they're the one that traded out of the pick. I mean, maybe all the O-line were pretty much off the board. I mean, you could have went Connerly or Josh Simmons. Maybe they preferred interior O-line, and without those guys on the board, they didn't really need to make the pick. They do... So I'll give the Texans trade... I'll just give it a B. They probably just didn't like who was on the board, and they got some assets in return. Next is the Falcons. We already went over the Falcons, but we'll go over the Rams real quickly. I think this is an S tier for the Rams. Yeah, you dropped all the way down to 46, but the Rams are used to picking late or not picking high, and they're used to picking well later in the draft. And you get a first-round pick from the Falcons, which could be in the top 20s. So I love the trade for the Rams. Next is the Ravens getting Malachi Starks out of Georgia, safety. I mentioned this in my second-round mock draft video. Don't know which one's coming out first. I love this fit. I think him and Kyle Hamilton complement each other perfectly. He's that, deep safety, high IQ safety, center field, I think they said, type guy. And then Kyle Hamilton, who also obviously is a very smart player too, can play in the box, which is his strength. So I think they fit each other perfectly. I think that's great value as well, getting him at pick 27. S-tier pick for me. Next, we have the Lions getting Tyleik Williams, 28, D-tackle. You can have your opinion which one of the better D-tackles, him or guys like Darius Alexander or Omar Norman Lott. And I think they just didn't like the pass rushers available. I mean, Mike Green was still on the board. Donovan Ezraku was still on the board. Edge rushers they could have paired alongside Aiden Hutchinson. But they went interior with Tyleik Williams. I'll give it a B. Again, not too familiar with Tyleik Williams. Obviously, I think they had to go D-line, whether it was a pass rusher or D tackle. They went the D tackle route. Didn't necessarily like the two that were available. I'll actually give it a C because I think they could have taken Mike Green or Donovan Ezraku instead of Tyleik Williams. But I still like the player, so I'm not going to give anything a D. Next is the Commanders going Josh Conerly, tackle out of Oregon. I'll just give it a B. They didn't really have a receiver. You could have went Luther Burden. You weren't going to go with any of the running backs probably. And I like getting a tackle, helping Jaden Daniels out, keep him upright. I like the pick. It's just a solid pick for me. Next is the Bills getting Maxwell Hairston at 30. Now, maybe it could have went with, again, Will Johnson, but we see he continued to fall. I like them going D-tackle throughout all this, but all the top 5 were literally off the board. So, I like Maxwell Hairston. I think he'll fit well in Buffalo. I'll give it a B for now, though. Just because, again, I know Will Johnson had the injury, but I think you could have taken Will Johnson with that pick. Next is the Chiefs and Eagles sort of swapping first-round picks. I think the Eagles just did that so no one would trade up for the Chiefs pick because they only give up a 5th. So I'm not going to talk about the trade. It was just a 5th-round pick. I'll just talk about the picks here. Eagles, S tier for Jahad Campbell. They wanted him earlier. They wanted to trade up earlier in the draft to get him. But you give up a 5th and you get him at 31. Now, yeah, you didn't necessarily need linebacker, but him and Zach Bond are going to be a great duo. And there's still plenty of good pass rushers and D tackles that can fill the actual needs they lost in free agency. And he's such a good player. I thought he was going to go much higher. So did they. To get him at 31, I think is great. And I honestly give the Chiefs an S tier for their draft as well. You get a tackle. Clearly, you needed one. Mahomes running for his life in the Super Bowl. The only reason you lost your 2 Super Bowls is because Mahomes didn't have time to throw the ball. And you get a very good tackle. The clear best tackle available the last first round. Based on picking at 32 or 31, whatever, he was the perfect pick for them. And you know what? I'm not going to make any changes. This is my final tier list for every team's first round draft. They didn't all make picks, but I just graded the trades that the teams made if they didn't make a pick. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Let me know your thoughts. How would you grade your team's first round? If you're new, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you next time. Peace.